Hello everyone, and welcome to Caregivers Connect with Alzheimer's New Jersey. I'm Lisa Marie Falbo, and joining me here today is the president of Alzheimer's New Jersey, Ken Zaentz. We're also joined by Andrea Simpson and Eric Rivera, caregivers who will be sharing their stories today. During this discussion, we will explore issues related to caring for a family member with Alzheimer's disease. Our guests will share insights and experiences about the effect of Alzheimer's on themselves and other family members. We want to raise awareness about the impact of Alzheimer's in our state and provide resources and practical information that will help other caregivers. Most of all, we want persons with Alzheimer's and their families to know that they do not have to face this disease alone. Before we begin, I just want to mention that today's program has been made possible through a generous contribution by AZI. Also, there is a QR code at the bottom of the screen to make a donation to a very important mission of Alzheimer's New Jersey. Let's begin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I know you were so happy, Ken, because we're doing this in person. Last year, it was in the little boxes, but we're here live.
A real conversation.
I'm very excited about that. And most importantly, the both of you, Eric, Andrea, I know it's very brave of you to come here and talk about such a sensitive topic. Andrea, I'll start with you and your mother and how you came to know this world.
Yeah, so my mother was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at 52 years old. I was 12 years old at the time, and this was 14 years ago now. She passed away last September.
I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. To have this happen to you as a preteen, I mean, that obviously shaped your life. It's such a sensitive time anyway. How did it affect you?
It was very difficult. At this point in my life, I come to realize that I think my mom was sick more in my life than she was healthy. So it definitely did shape a lot of my upbringing and who I am today, which isn't always fully bad. But it definitely was really difficult. I think one of the most difficult things for me was trying to wrap my head around everything that was happening as it was happening, especially in the beginning. My family, didn't really know at first what exactly was going on with my mom. So while they were trying to figure it out, run all the different types of tests and rule everything out, because of course, Alzheimer's was the last thing that we wanted to be told was what she had. They kind of kept me a little bit in the dark while they were figuring things out. And that was difficult in itself because I was old enough to know that something was going on, but at the same time, I felt like I wasn't old enough to know what it was. So that was, I would say, probably one of the most difficult things for me was that first year or so when they were still trying to figure things out before we got an official diagnosis.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to you. Thank you for setting the stage for the rest of this conversation. Eric, you're dealing with your father and his Alzheimer's disease, and what makes your story so much more difficult and heartbreaking is that you don't even live in the same state. You're kind of like a virtual caregiver in a lot of ways.
Yes. But it's really a family effort. The whole family gets involved, and I'm going there Friday to see him. I'm there probably every other month. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge because we all have to coordinate with each other's schedules. My sister, Arlene Ramirez, she's the backbone of it. She lives in New York. My niece, Kimberly Suarez, lives in California. My nephew lives in New York, Jonathan Suarez. Those are the people who I feel are really the backbone. And though I'm there a lot, I feel I'm not there enough. I just have that feeling I should be doing more. And it's heartbreaking.
When did your father get the diagnosis?
We started noticing things probably. He lived in New York, he moved to Florida about 10 years ago. We would chalked it up to people getting older, losing it a little bit, right? But he got the diagnosis probably right before COVID, 2019. We took a family vacation to the Bahamas, and that's when I kind of started noticing he kept on losing things, kept on getting lost in the resort. And then after COVID, it was just terrible.
How old was your father at diagnosis?
71.
Okay. Young, so young. Your mother, forget about it. She was a baby, 52?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Too young.
That's when she got her official diagnosis.
Yeah.
She started actually showing symptoms like soon after her 50th birthday.
Oh. So Eric, how did your family react when you got the word?
We just came together. We just came together and tried to do the best we could. During COVID, very difficult because we couldn't go down. And that's what I believe was the biggest. He deteriorated more during that time, during that year, because we couldn't go see him, to your point. And when you have that disease and you're just my stepmother and my father in the house all day, nobody else is visiting, my father can't hear too well either. So it was very difficult for him. So when I was able to see him after COVID, I said, wow, he's really gone down bad since I last saw him.
I mean, Ken, COVID, we did a lot of work together during COVID and trying to get the message of what you do out there. But talk about how COVID impacted the Alzheimer's community, and the effects are still being felt today.
They are. Well, caring for someone with Alzheimer's disease is difficult enough, and sometimes caregivers themselves feel extremely isolated. They get isolated from their friends, they get isolated from their neighbors because they're spending so much time on the caregiving responsibilities. COVID just made that worse. The isolation that caregivers felt then got sort of transferred to the isolation that was obviously felt by their loved ones who were in long-term care, for whom they couldn't have any visitors. That in a lot of cases, the isolation caused a lot of health deterioration in the person with Alzheimer's disease who was in long-term care. So it was just a terrible situation, aside from the disease itself, which was bad enough, but it had that extra impact on people with Alzheimer's disease and their family members.
Yeah, and I think the both of you can attest, you don't get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease very quickly. It's a lot of testing, and we'll get into that, but COVID probably made it even more of a hurdle.
He got progressively worse after COVID because he just wasn't going out. He wasn't communicating. There was nobody in the house. So when I saw him after COVID, it was very, very hard.
And the level, he didn't get that care because of COVID.
He didn't get that care, exactly. He didn't get the care either.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece as well.
So Andrea, your mom, like we said, was so young. Mm-hmm. What was your family's reaction?
Like I said before, at least those first year or two, I was kind of, kept in the dark a little bit. But now that I'm older and I've spoken to my dad and stuff, my aunt about, kind of what was really going on during that time, it was shock. My mom was, I always say, anytime I go in the food store, I almost laugh at myself because I would always dread going in there with her, because if she ran into one person she knew and she knew everyone in town, we would be there for hours. So my mom could talk to a wall. She just was such a social and fun-loving, outgoing person. So for something like this to happen to her, who, was always so on top of everything, it was shocking, and it was, I think, devastating to all of us. And like I said, they tried to, figure out if it was menopause or if there was just some imbalance going on in her brain, all different types of things. Finally, my aunt took her to her primary care doctor for the cognitive ability test, I think it's called, and she just did not do well at all. And that was kind of the first step of her finally getting the Alzheimer's diagnosis.
Once, Ken, you fail that first test, because that's what most people are doing, right? They're going to their primary care and trying to get to the bottom of it. So once it becomes apparent there's a major issue here, what normally comes next?
Well, there can be a referral to a specialist like a neurologist, where there can be other tests that are done to really try to come up with a definitive diagnosis. I think the hard part, with Andrea's mom is that no one expects someone who's 52 years old to have Alzheimer's disease. So while there were probably signs and symptoms, I'm going to guess, and I don't know your situation obviously, but my guess is that a lot of things got ignored because how could that be?
Exactly. Did you notice that she was kind of losing her touch?
Yeah, like I said, she was always talking, and definitely, at least with my mom's, Alzheimer's, one of the first things that really was affected heavily was her speech. So I just remember, she would be talking, and then all of a sudden you could actually see it on her face. Like, she would go to say something and you would see her really trying to think about it. And then, she kind of would just be like, oh, forget it, Or she would, and I think it's something some of us do, sometimes you go to say a word and you think you know exactly what word you're going to say and something completely different comes out. But that was all the time. And with her, it's we would catch ourselves and be like, oh my God, I don't know why I just said that. She just would think that she said the right word and just would move on with the conversation. So that was, kind of when I started to realize things were not, okay. And also she just, the car with her was one of the things. I remember one time her and I got very lost together. We were going down to my grandparents in South Jersey and she forgot the exit, which they lived there since I was 3 years old. And we got very lost, and I had to actually ask someone for directions and try to help us get back because she didn't even know. She was just so flustered and upset and didn't know what to do. And I remember that was really a moment where I was like, something is really not okay.
Did you notice similar things happening with your dad?
Yes and no, but because I was not there often, right? I was living in New Jersey, but when I did go down, I did notice he was acting strange, pulling me to the side, telling me things that weren't true, like about my stepmom, Yolanda. And it was a challenge because is it just old age? I mean, I'm not a professional, I'm not a is he just losing it a little bit, or does he have this disease? And how is it impacting him? And so all these things going through my head. And then when he was diagnosed, and we kind of came together as a family and tried to help.
So Ken, we all lead very hectic lives. What's the difference though between maybe being a little scatterbrained and just overburdened with life versus Alzheimer's?
A lot of it is about the behaviors that, that come with the forgetfulness. So for example, there's certainly normal age-related forgetfulness. And like Andrea said, we all sort of forget. You might forget a name, but you'll remember it later. Or you might temporarily forget where you put your keys. But when you find those keys and you don't know what they're for, or you find them because you put them in the refrigerator or in the washing machine, that's probably a good example of the difference between what I would call normal sort of age-related forgetfulness and a disease like Alzheimer's. We all slow down when we get older, so although we don't want to admit that, but there's a difference between slowing down and not being able to do something at all. So just, that's just another example.
Yeah. So you get the diagnosis. Your family had to come together. Both of your families banded together, it sounds like, thank God. Because there could be a lot of drama with that too. That's a whole different show and discussion, right? So you got the diagnosis. How did you set up the level of care for him during a pandemic?
Well, the Zoom was very big back then because we couldn't go, right? So we would have the FaceTime. And at that time, he could talk, verbalize. And we did as much as we could. We had to take turns. In 2022 was big because we would take turns of going to Florida to spend time with him. At that time, he was in a nursing home. At that time in 2022, they did give him an aid, but it was only for 8 hours, so it wasn't enough time. My stepmother really took the brunt of it. She was really dealing with a lot. But constant communication, constant love, and just constant appreciation that, hey, as bad as it is, there's always somebody who has it worse. And I always try to look at it brought the family together. So I always look at the good things. But it was very challenging, especially during COVID.
Of course. How did your family band together?
Like I said, so I'm very blessed. I have 2 older sisters, and I have my mom's twin sister who is like my mom. And then my dad, of course. And my mom's other siblings and very close, family friends and things like that. But we all kind of just, it was, at least for us, we tried our best to not try to think too far ahead into the future. Because I think one thing we learned, at least for my mom's situation, was that you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, what kind of mood she was going to be in, if she was going to be able to, feed herself that day or not, or if she wanted to or not, So kind of just saying, okay, this is today, and how are we going to, handle it? And going from there, it definitely, like I said, it's a lot of just teamwork and everyone trying their best to kind of, shuffle the load so that no one has too much on themselves. Because once you're too worn out, you're not the best caregiver at that point, which anyone can only handle so much. So definitely just, I think my family and I did a good job at seeing when someone kind of needed a second to tap out, and just take a day or two to themselves and go away with some friends, or, do something, for themselves, so that when they can come back, they can, be a better caregiver.
But for you still had middle school to get through, high school, college, adulthood. How did this transform those experiences?
It definitely, you think about being a teenager, and going through all of that different, emotions and experiences, and trying to figure out, who you are, on top of, having something like a parent with early onset Alzheimer's, at home. It definitely was really difficult. I felt very alone and isolated, because even though, I'm grateful, I have one of my very best friends, who is really kind of one of my only friends now, who really knew my mom before she got sick. I would confide in her, but it's, and she would support me as best as she could. But when someone hasn't gone through it themselves, it's really kind of, there's always that little bit of disconnect. And I even felt that with my sisters or my aunt and my dad, because, even my sisters, yes, they lost our mom too, but they are 10 years older than me. So they were 22 when she got diagnosed. So it's 12 and 22 is a very different, situation. So I just, I felt very isolated. But thankfully, I was pushed by my family to seek therapy, and that really was my saving grace. Going from middle school to high school, and not only just using that to help me navigate that, but also navigate that without my mom, but also with my mom being sick.
So you got the diagnosis. Your families came together to figure out the caregiving plan. You went into therapy. Did you go into therapy?
Absolutely.
You did. Good.
Absolutely.
Good for you. I'm so happy to hear that. What other outside support, though, I'll start with you, did you get? Did your family get? Resources, doctors?
So since my mom was so young, there wasn't really a lot of support available, because they would look at her age on paper and they would say, oh, no, she can't. She doesn't qualify for this. She's only 52. She doesn't have this. We'd be like, we have a diagnosis. And they'd be like, well, it does, and again, it was a little difficult for me because I was so young. So that was kind of something that my dad and my older sisters and my aunt kind of handled. But I remember, even just the Medicaid process, it took us years to get her fully on Medicaid. My dad ended up having to get a lawyer to help us through that process because they kept denying her application.
Okay, well, we're going to get to you in a second, Ken, about that. That is insane. The last thing you want to be dealing with when you're faced with this are lawyers. Wow. How about you, Eric?
Okay, pause. I'm sorry. What was the question?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'll ask it again.
I'm sorry.
Don't worry.
I'm so sorry.
Eric, how about you? Did you have outside support groups or doctors or anybody that helped you through this plight?
Well, besides the family, I met Ken at an event, and he was the only person that I knew. And I said, hey, Ken, I need some. How can I? My father has Alzheimer's. How do you know any nursing homes? How can I get involved? What can I do? And he was basically my support for the first year that my father was diagnosed. I joined the board of Alzheimer's, and my goal is basically to get the word out and let people know that, you know, this is a challenge, and, you know, we got to prepare for this, because we were not prepared. I'm a banker, and I wasn't prepared.
No.
And you think Medicaid, Medicare, you know, trust accounts, all that stuff, we were not prepared. And it's a lot of work, you know, especially when you have siblings and you have, you know, my father was a very modest salary. He didn't have a lot of money, but even if you have a little bit of money, it's very hard to qualify for Medicaid. And it takes years, to your point, to qualify. We had to get lawyers involved as well.
Yeah. Ken, why is this so difficult on these families? Let's talk about that, the money side and the insurance side, and what a nightmare the both of them had to go through.
And most people who are paying for care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease are paying out of pocket. They're just, you know, if you're over 65, which in Andrea's mom's case, she wasn't, and that made it even, you know, more complicated. But even, you know, Medicare was never designed to be a long-term care insurance policy. It's an acute care insurance policy. So if someone has dementia and they fall, unfortunately, because they're confused and they, you know, break a leg or break a hip, Medicare will pay for that. But the underlying reason for why the person fell, the confusion from dementia, Medicare is not paying for that. So that's why getting a diagnosis early and having the time to plan is so important for caregivers, because as Eric said, there are so many little nuances. There are so many things that you have to prepare for. And it does sometimes take an attorney to really help you sort through all that, a financial planner, because, you know, even private insurance is the day-to-day needs of the person with Alzheimer's, home healthcare, for example, someone to help with dressing, bathing, that is not paid for. Those are the things that caregivers need for relief, but those are things that insurance doesn't pay for.
But if you are struggling with money, you have to hire an attorney. That's not cheap either.
No, but there are some pro bono resources, you know, that you can get as well. Not a lot, but it's really difficult. And, you know, as Andrea said, in her situation, when, you know, her mom is so young, there's just a lot that's not available. It's because of, you know, what her mom's age. I mean, people who get the disease under the age of 65, while it is much more rarer form of the disease, we say that the greatest risk factor for developing Alzheimer's is aging, and it's over 65. There just, unfortunately, isn't a lot available for people who do get the disease at a younger age. And that's why people think Alzheimer's is a disease of getting older. Well, it's not. Age is the greatest risk factor, but it is not the cause of the disease.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you found Alzheimer's disease, I'm going to do that again. Cut. Okay. You mentioned that you met Ken at an Alzheimer's New Jersey event. How did you find out about the organization?
I spoke to somebody who invited me to the event because my father was diagnosed, and I was introduced to Ken, and then we started having conversations, and I eventually joined the board, I believe the beginning of 2022. And, you know, like I said before, my sole mission on this board is to get the word out and to make sure that everybody knows and to be prepared. And these are tough conversations you have to have. I remember having a conversation with my dad if I wanted to take over the financial responsibility. He got mad at me. He goes, "I'm not a baby. You don't tell me what to do." And as his son, I backed away. In retrospect, maybe I should have been a little bit tougher, or maybe I should have handled it differently. Maybe I could have done it a different way. But he wasn't at that time capable of writing checks. He was late on checks. He was bouncing checks. He was doing all this stuff, and then he wouldn't give me the availability or the capability to do it for him.
How did you find refuge in Alzheimer's New Jersey?
I was actually referred to Alzheimer's New Jersey and Ken through a family friend who connected us.
Were you blown away that finally there was something for you and your family to turn to?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, really opened my eyes to more resources that are out there for, individuals, families, anyone that, has questions. Definitely it made me feel grateful because it seemed like there was more available than what was available to me and my family in the beginning of my mom's diagnosis, like 14 years ago.
Ken, again, why aren't healthcare providers making these resources available? Because it would be so much easier to navigate if they were giving this education at the get-go.
It would be, and it would be great if, every time there was a diagnosis of Alzheimer's in the physician's office, especially the primary care physician, if they would just give our toll-free number.
Give the toll-free number, by the way.
Give our website. It's alznj.org. That would be great, and then we could, we would certainly take it over from there. But I think even physicians, and understandably, they don't know all the resources that are available in the community. I mean, there are some physician practices that are actually full-fledged evaluation centers, and they have a social worker and along with the physician, and they do have those resources. But there aren't a lot in New Jersey. There aren't a lot of doctors who specialize in geriatric medicine in New Jersey either. Actually, it's one of those specialties that is where there just aren't enough anywhere. So that makes it, difficult. And the diagnosis is difficult, but it's also physicians have a hard time with it because sometimes they don't want to deliver that news. Sometimes physicians feel like they don't want to create the stress in the person with the disease and the family members. So sometimes they don't give the diagnosis, which is, another big issue.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing with caregiving too is the team that you have to build. And that's something that I don't know if this is anywhere. You kind of have to live it. So I shared with you about my family is going through this now with my grandfather, unfortunately. He's going to be 95. It's a slow and gentle decline. But I think the thing that blows me away is he's got 4 daughters, my mom being one of them. My grandmother is still active and can help him. They have a live-in 24 hours a day. They have backups for the live-in. It's still not enough. Because if my grandmother has to go to the store and the caregiver that lives with them isn't there, 8 different people have to rearrange their schedules to make it happen for my grandmother to go to the store for an hour. That's what blows me away about this whole thing. And I have met so many people, and you have too. They're going at this alone. How do you make that work?
It's really hard. And I have to give a lot of credit to Eric and Andrea's families that they did come together. And you really have to. Families need to meet and have a conversation and decide who's going to do what. Not every member of every family has the personality to necessarily be the primary caregiver, but maybe one family member is better at finances, and as Eric was saying, could help dad with finances. Another family member can maybe help with taking, turns being in the house if that's what needs to happen. So it really is about kind of being able to come together, meet together, have a family meeting, and sort of divide and conquer, because it is very difficult to do this alone. And, and then finding us. I mean, we always say, we want to be there for caregivers when they need us. So calling us, it's one of the things that I think we do really well is caregivers call us and they end up getting answers to questions that they didn't even know they had questions about, because we ask. Somebody might call for a specific program, or they want to know about registering for one of our education programs, and the next thing you know, we've had a 45-minute to an hour conversation, and they come away with so much information that, again, they didn't even know what questions to ask.
Exactly. I think another theme with the both of you today is your specific populations. Your mother was so young when she got diagnosed. Your father, you're Hispanic, obviously, and Alzheimer's impacts the Hispanic community in a big way.
Absolutely, more than the average person. And that's what I really want to get the word out, because I think our community, the Hispanic community, Latino community, we just don't know, right? I'm a first generation born here. So, we don't know about the resources, and we just like to keep things to ourselves, kind of, our community. Some Latinos don't trust, I'm not going to say me, but I would say some. And I just think we have to do a better job, and I have to do a better job as a Latino man dealing with this, to get out to the community and say, hey, this is what we need to prepare for. This is some information we need to educate, right? At the end of the day, we have to educate our constituents, right? And I've told Ken that's kind of my goal here as part of a board member, is to educate the Latino community, get more people involved, so we could, not cure this disease, but help the caregivers with some of the issues that Andrea and I are having.
Well, I think the biggest issue probably is that mistrust that Latinos have with doctors of any kind. Why is that?
It's just, I was born here, so I'm like the wrong person to ask, but it's just just listening to grandparents and listening to parents and just keeping things in-house. Like, don't let anything out of the house, right? What happens in the family stays in the family. If this person is sick or that person's sick, we'll take care of it together. And the language barrier could be an issue too, right? If I speak Spanish and you speak English and I don't know and I can't understand, so that was ingrained in a lot of my grandparents and father and my mother. But now I'm born here. I can speak English well, better than Spanish. So it's my job, it's my duty to get out there and kind of say, hey, we're here to help, and this is what we could do. Yeah. And these are some of the resources that we have to help you as you go through this process, because as you stated, Latino people are more inclined to get Alzheimer's.
Why is that scientifically? Do you know the answer to that?
Well, there's a lot. I think there's a lot of possible reasons. It may have to do with the fact that there's an increased incidence of cardiac disease, diabetes, stroke in the Hispanic Latino community. It also may have to do with the fact that there is, like in some other underserved communities, that there is just the general socioeconomic conditions that lead to a lack of access to healthcare. So we find that, in the Hispanic Latino community, they tend to wait longer before they seek medical help, and then the disease is even more progressed, so there's kind of less that can be done. And there's a lot of studies going on right now to see if there are biological reasons for, why it's about Latinos and Hispanics seem to be 1.5 times more likely to get Alzheimer's disease than in the non-Hispanic white community. So that's a big difference. So it could be a combination of all of those factors. So that problem has been identified. The exact reason really has not, but there's a lot of studies that are being done right now to find that out.
Just another mystery of this disease to add to the list.
Unfortunately, that's
right?
True.
Did you want to add to what Ken was saying?
No, I think he stated it very, very well. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the economic conditions as well, right? We immigrated to this country in the 60s and 50s. My grandparents, and we weren't making any money. We were eating bad. We don't have doctors. We just kind of winged it, right? So now that I'm here and people of my genre are here, hopefully we could get a little bit better, making sure that we eat the right foods, making sure we see the doctors, and making sure that there are people like us that could educate some people about it.
New Jersey, though, is such a melting pot. There's a huge Latino population, Black population, Indian, white. How does Alzheimer's New Jersey help all of these different segments?
It's hard. I mean, and are we perfect at it? We're not. I think in some ways COVID sort of helped in that we all turned to virtual, and I think that our ability to do outreach to a larger population increased, through the use of webinars and people who can't leave home, so it certainly helped in that way. But what people call our helpline, we have translation service that's available in many different languages. So that helps. But it really is, trying to get out into those communities, as much as we possibly can, and help to sort of, to build that trust.
Yeah. How do you do that though? How do you go into a huge Latino community and build that?
You have to be present. You have to be there. It takes time. It's like any other relationship. It's not going to be built in a day, right? Any type of relationship takes time. That's beneficial to both, right? So we have to be there, the churches. We have to be at the social events. We have to be, just giving, maybe even giving communication in Spanish, right? And I'm going to have to learn to speak Spanish a little bit better because my Spanish kind of fell off a little bit. But people like me being out there, right? A Latino, somebody who they see, he looks like me. So let me listen to him because he's going through what I'm going through. And maybe, over time we could definitely penetrate that market better.
Did you ever think when your father got diagnosed, though, this would be your life's mission? Because that's what it sounds like now.
No, to be honest with you. I'm very passionate about anything that impacts my family. And my father's my father, right? So he's going through a tough time. So it's my duty to make sure that other people don't go through a tough time like I'm going through, my family's going through.
Andrea, do you feel the same way, that it's terrible what you and your family went through, but you're here today to give a voice to other caregivers?
Yeah.
So you're making lemonade out of lemons.
I mean, if you asked me probably a few years ago, like I said, I definitely, when I was younger, had a lot of anger and bitterness and confusion myself about what was going on. But it's taken me time, and I think I'll still need time to fully accept what has happened to my mom and what my family and myself and she has been through, she went through. But I definitely don't think I would be the person I am today if she did not get sick. I think it just, and I'm sure, Eric, you can understand, and kind of from what you've seen, it shows you, a level of empathy and compassion that I don't think I would have known otherwise. Just kind of realizing that, some of the stuff that we really, stress about and worry about, it really doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. You really are your health, and being able to, be with your family and your loved ones, and really just enjoying the moments and the memories, and being present. So
that's so important.
Yeah.
Do either of you worry that Alzheimer's disease is going to happen to you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, at least in my mom's situation, there's no family history of it. Both of my grandparents, her parents, lived into their 90s and were sharp as tacks until the end. So we don't really know why this happened to her. But yeah, no, my sisters and I have talked about it. And they each have 3 children now. And it's definitely something that, we worry about. But just kind of, like I said, it's about, at least for me, being present. You don't know what can happen tomorrow. So just trying not to get too far in your head about the future.
Yeah. How about you? Do you have that?
Absolutely. I think about it often. I even speak to people who are close to me. Hey, do you notice anything different? Like when I forget stuff, I kind of have a little, both my grandmothers had the disease, my father. So, I speak to my doctor often, just to make sure that I probably overreact a little bit. Like if I can't find my keys, I'm like, oh my God, But to answer your question, yes, I do think about it often.
I think that's not talked about enough in respect to caregivers. It's all about the family member that they're focused on and trying to get day by day, minute by minute. But a lot of people dealing with this in their families have this underlying fear.
They do. I think we all do. I think, the data says that Alzheimer's disease is probably, one of the most feared diseases now. I mean, we're all afraid of it as we get older. What we know right now in terms of genetics and Alzheimer's disease, or what science tells us, is that while we can identify genes that are probably indicators of Alzheimer's disease, except in the most rare form of the disease where it absolutely runs in families, there is no evidence right now that says, if you have this genetic predisposition for the disease, that you will definitely get it. So it's probably, we're going to find out someday that maybe there's this genetic predisposition, but then something else happens, in combination with the genetics. But right now, there's no, and again, except in the very rare form of the disease where it absolutely runs in families, where if you have this certain gene, you're definitely going to get Alzheimer's disease. That's not where science is right now.
Yeah. What I wanted to say also is that we have to be prepared, right? Like I said, my father lived very modest, didn't make a lot of money, but there were issues that he wasn't prepared for legally, right? So myself this year, I'm going to prepare. And when you hear trust and wills, you think about people, millionaires. No, it's people, everyday people like us, blue collar people, white collar, everybody should be prepared just in case, right? We have insurance for our cars, we have insurance for our house. Why not take insurance for yourself if you get sick or at a late age, right? Because I don't want my children to go through what I remember coming to my mother. She gave me a box. She's like, Eric, I know your father has money somewhere, but here's all the things. I had called all these people. Hey, this is, and I finally got where the money was, because in my household, my father was the one that took care of the financials. Stepmother was the one that kind of managed the household. So it was just, so I don't want to burden my children or my loved ones with that. So I want to take a step forward and be proactive.
Everybody should have a plan, a financial advisor to help you navigate that plan, because when things like this go down, that's your first call, right? The financial advisor.
Exactly. Power of attorney is so important.
I'm a banker. I think I'm a pretty smart guy, but I didn't know any of this until about 5 years ago, and all the hard work and it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare.
Well, this leads into one of my last questions here for other caregivers that have either been in this journey for many years or just starting to embark on it. What advice do you have to give them?
My main thing of advice would be to, even though it feels like you might be completely alone and isolated, that there's no way no one else can ever understand what you're going through, that there are people who understand, especially like we talked about, Alzheimer's, and even I think especially early onset Alzheimer's is becoming, unfortunately, more common of a diagnosis and a disease. That just means there are, more, children that are affected, siblings, caregivers that are out there and who are experiencing what you're experiencing. And not being afraid to ask for help. Like I said, I was kind of pushed into therapy and was kind of told by my dad, like, this is what's happening. And it was the best thing he could have ever done for me. And I think before that, I was definitely holding a lot in and suffering in silence a lot. And like Eric said, like not wanting to be a burden. My family was so caught up in taking care of my mom. Like, how could I possibly say like I was struggling too, Like there was no one to help because everyone was so focused on her. But still, that's not an excuse to, feel like you're in it by yourself and, you can't, like they say, like on an airplane, like you got to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help someone else. And I think that's definitely something that took me a while to learn. But once I did, it definitely helped me not only with my mom and taking care of her and being there for her as best as I could, but also with the other members of my family.
I tell that to myself every day. Put the oxygen mask on first so you can help others, because there's a lot of people that need me.
It's hard to
right?
learn, and it's hard.
It's very, very, especially when you have so much empathy and
Yep.
you want to take care of everybody else. All right, I'll worry about myself later, but you run out of steam after a while if you don't
Without a doubt.
take care of you. Any parting words here today?
Similar to what Andre said, just be prepared. Nobody likes to have the conversation as you get older. What's going to happen? But whether you have $1 million or $1,000, speak to a professional and get prepared. Right? You don't want to be in a situation where it takes 5 years to get Medicaid. Right? You want to be prepared for that prior, just in case. Insurance, right? So, but other than that, I agree with what Andre says, and good luck to everybody.
Yeah. And even if you are young and watching this, here's another reason why you should save your money and smartly invest, because unfortunately you are going to probably need it in one way or another for some sort of help. So be proactive about that. Now, nobody wants to think about that.
No.
That's not fun.
No.
But you don't want to be stuck. Ken, any last words before we leave here today?
Well, I think, from our perspective, and Eric and Andrea are such great examples of this, just you can't do it by yourself. You need support. And I really think that the ability for someone to deal with a crisis has so much to do with support, whether it's on the medical side, like therapy, whether it's religious, whether it's a friend, whether it's a family member, or the organization that we are, where we can be there to provide, to provide support. Support is just so important. And also, I think not really trying to continue to connect with your loved one with Alzheimer's disease, even if the facts of the relationship are very confusing for the person with the disease, because the emotional connection, the need for emotional connection is still there. The person with Alzheimer's disease, I'm guaranteeing that knows that you're someone important and special in that person's life, even though they may not remember, unfortunately, that you're the son or you're the daughter. So being where they are and trying to, to wherever possible, connect in those really small moments, I think is just so important.
And connecting and having a reaction of compassion.
Exactly.
Not of anger, not of
Exactly.
angst, because you can escalate the situation like that.
Right.
So we're coming to you on Giving Tuesday, and we wanted to share the important mission of Alzheimer's New Jersey, and it really centers around the caregivers. Ken, why should people watching support Alzheimer's New Jersey?
Well, because the work that we do, I think, is vital for the community. Having a place for answers, learning more about the disease, getting educated, having our staff help to solve problems, to brainstorm, to be a resource. That's so important for caregivers, and that's really where we are. We're here when people need us. We're not curing the disease today, but we want to be here today so that caregivers can have the best day possible. And we can only do that through charitable contributions. That's where our funding comes from. So a day like Giving Tuesday, which is now a global day of giving, is so important to not only what we do tomorrow, but what we do all year long. So it's Giving Tuesday today, but it's a giving day every day, because that's what sustains us. That's what what keeps us going, and that's our ability, the engine and the energy and the fuel that is our ability to provide the services that that we do. So it really is important, and it really makes a difference right in your own community. If you're living in New Jersey, or you have family members in New Jersey, because that's what we're all about. Alzheimer's New Jersey, it's in our name. All of our services are for people who are in New Jersey who are dealing with this disease.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people in New Jersey dealing with this disease.
There are. If you look at the numbers of caregivers plus people with the disease, we're talking about over 600,000 impacted in our own state.
And unfortunately, that number is growing.
It is.
That number is growing. Well, make sure to visit alzheimersnj.org or follow the QR code at the bottom of your screen to learn more and make a donation. Eric, Andrea, thank you so much for coming on here. I know it's not easy to come on television to talk about such a topic, but you are doing such a service for your family and for all caregivers and patients around the state. And Ken, as always, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me and for having Andrea and Eric here too.
Oh, thank you. For more information, please visit alznj.org. Thank you to AZI for their generosity in making today possible.